Alright, can you give me your name?
Hi, my name is Emma Jean, and it was Saunders before I got married. And up until I was born in Houlton, Maine, 1935.
Can you tell me about the railroad tracks?
Yes, I was born on Grove Street, down near the railroad station,
Yeah.
and used to play down there because they had, you could go in the station and buy Chiclets gum, put a penny or so in the machine, and out would drop these little packages of Chiclets gum. And there was a bunch of children, and I was part of that group on Grove Street, and maybe of 10 children, all of a certain age, like 5 up to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And there were older people or older children that wanted to be in our group, and we never allowed it. They knew more, and they did things that we didn't do.
Yeah.
We didn't like to do. And gee, you stopping it every once in a while when I stop?
No. I'm just gonna keep going.
Okay. Yeah, and used to play in the box cars, and they had what they called the ice houses, where they kept down by the tracks.
Yeah.
And they kept the ice in it, and all summer they'd go in there and take out these great big blocks of ice and put them in wagons and take them around. And
Yeah.
back then we didn't have electric refrigerators. We had what they called an ice box, and they put the ice in the top part.
Yeah.
And then there was a place for your food, and it kept good until the ice went. And we used to follow the ice wagon around in the summertime because there'd be chips of ice fall off. And we had ice picks,
Yeah.
called ice picks, to chip the ice. And if you wanted some in your drink. And I don't know how long that lasted. The ice would last not very long, I suppose. It would melt. But we used to go in the ice houses and swing from ropes from blocks of ice, and the ice was covered with sawdust.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't very clean, but we used to swing from ropes down there, and we had a ball. I had a wonderful childhood, and we ran all over the place. We ran uptown and downtown, and they used to be, behind the stores, they had a kind of a little dump area.
Yeah.
And, you know, the receipts of things, they would have a little book.
Yeah.
They put receipts in and marked it out. And
What about, didn't your mother tell you not to go down to the railroad tracks?
probably. My brother Charles used to tattle a lot on me. I always knew if Charles got a home ahead of me, because Mama would be saying, you know, what were you down there for? And she didn't really want me down there. And there was a hobo, what they called a hobo jungle.
Yeah.
Where you could, we used to go there too, but we never ever seen the hobos. They only would be there maybe at night or
Yeah.
coming in on a train. And us children used to go down there, and they would be like hammocks up in the trees from one limb to the next, where they would climb up to be off the ground and lay in a kind of a...
So they were just there all the time?
The
hammocks?
beds,
Yeah.
yeah, the hammocks, yeah.
Wow.
The place where you could see the fireplace too, where they would be maybe preparing a meal. Oh, and when the hobos were there, they used to go around the neighborhood and knock on doors to get food.
Yeah.
And they would come in on the train, and yeah, and they would work. If you had any chores to do, they would ask if they could do something so they could get some food. And I don't know as I ever seen a real hobo.
No?
No.
None ever came to your house?
I don't think so, but I know they did go right through the neighborhood and No, it was, but the soldiers used to come in on the train, too.
Yeah?
Yeah, and leave. We used to go down to the station to say goodbye to them, us children.
For what war?
Well, it would have to be World War II.
Yeah?
Yeah. And, yeah, that's when Hitler was going, Hirohito and Mussolini.
Yeah?
And we used to have, Mama used to have what they had food stamps back then. If you didn't have your stamp, you didn't get your sugar or certain items that would be scarcity
Yeah.
of. And we used to say that us children would be walking around and we would say that Hitler wanted our bread. Yeah, and we used to go in the stores, and we used to go in the tops of stores. We'd get on the roofs.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's where Mama didn't really want me to do, get up on the roofs.
What would you do up there?
We would go to a window of a store and go in.
You'd go in off the roof?
Yeah, in a window. We would find a window and go in. And this was all near the tracks, too. And the potato houses, they had a lot of potato houses down near the station, too, to truck the potatoes out in down country or whatever.
Yeah.
And up country, yeah. And there was a turntable down at the station, too, for the trains. They would get on that turntable and it would turn them around and face the train in which direction they wanted to go.
Yeah.
Uh,
You said you used to get out of school early for potatoes?
oh, yes. And that's when we moved, yeah, to Bridgewater. Yeah, when the fall came and the potato harvesting was going on, we used to be out of school for at least a couple of weeks just during the potato harvest,
Mm-hmm.
to harvest the potatoes.
Did you ever have to harvest potatoes?
I picked potatoes, but I didn't earn very many clothes because I was not that great of a picker. There were some people, though, that were big pickers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they made a lot of money.
Did people dress differently back then?
Yes, they wore anklets.
What's that?
Well, it was a little ankle stocking
Yeah.
and what they called saddle shoes. They were black and white.
Yeah.
And it looked like a saddle, I guess, because the black part of the shoe. And we wore sneakers. And there wasn't any elastic during the war either.
Yeah.
And you tied your underwear up with string. There wasn't any elastic in the waist. And if your string came untied, you was out your underwear. You could walk right out of them. And, oh yeah, and they used to have artificial things to put in your bra and make you look like you had they were falsies is what they were. A lot of girls would go swimming and jump in the water and they never ever claimed them though. They never said, oh, that's mine. Yeah.
Were the vehicles different?
Yes, they used to have rumble seats, what they called a rumble seat.
What's that?
Well, it was a little thing you opened up in the back. Well, you know how you open your trunk up? Well, it opened up in the reverse. Instead of picking it up, it was pulled down.
Yeah.
And there was a seat inside. And it was called a rumble seat. And my mother had a vehicle, and that's what we had. We'd get in there and sit. Wonderful. It was like riding in a convertible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was separate from the inside of the car. And
So you were the head cheerleader?
well, that was when I was in high school. Yeah, well, 6th grade it was. Yeah, and there was, let's see, maybe, there wasn't very many of us. 4 or 5, oh yeah, and then I was doing cartwheels at one of the games,
Mm-hmm.
flipping, and my skirt was taffeta, and it went up over my head, and the coach said that couldn't be. He complained to the woman that was the head of the cheerleaders, you know, the
Yeah.
organizer, like the coach or whatever. And he said that couldn't be. I had to stop doing my cartwheels during the game. Yeah, that was real ancient.
Were your skirts long?
Yes. Yeah. Kind of like down 3/4 of your leg down, almost to your ankles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So you hadn't... When did you first see a TV?
when I got married,
And when was that?
when I was 17, that would be in 1953, 54.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I didn't see a TV till then.
What did you think when you saw it?
Well, I thought it was wonderful when I heard about, being able to see a picture in moving parts inside a box. I couldn't wait to see it, because I'd heard about it. It was a really wonderful thing to be able to see. And there was a lot of taffeta, and it rustled when you walked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had full skirts. And I had a sundress when I was 17 too, and I had a strapless bra, and to go with that sundress, it was blue.
The sundress or the bra?
No, well, that's the sundress. It straps, but it needed a strapless bra underneath
Yeah.
to make it look good. Yeah. And they had sweaters, what they called sweater sets back then. There was a short-sleeved undersweater and then a long-sleeve one that went over that. And they used to come in sets of the same color or whatever. And oh dear, you had to iron your clothes back then. Everybody had a clothes pile with the ironing in it. And yeah, everything had to be ironed. And a lot of things, a lot of materials weren't washable. If you washed them, that was it. That was the end of your clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And used to put starch in clothes. And what else?
How many children did you have?
I had 6 children.
What was it like raising all of them?
It was wonderful, and that's what I wanted. Before I got married, I prayed that I was going to have that many children, and yeah. And I got 3 boys and 3 girls. That was something. But I thought my first one was going to be a boy. I had them all named and everything.
Why'd you think it was going to be a boy?
I wanted it to be a boy. My mother said, you can't pick the gender of your baby. And she couldn't convince me of that. And I had the name picked out, my dad's name, and it was born, and she was born on his birthday. And I thought, oh my gosh. And when they told me it was a girl, I couldn't believe it. And I said, I am going to still name her Blake somehow. So we put Ina on the end, and that made it Blakina. And that's a girly sounding name. And it's very unusual. No, never heard of it since.
Yeah.
And then Gerald named Holly. And Kirk, he kind of named Kirk too. I said, I can't get my tongue around that name, Kirk, because it had a K on the front and a K on the end. And Genevieve liked it so much, that's his sister, that she named one of hers Kurt, K-U-R-T. And yeah, it was really something. I've had a wonderful life and very interesting. We lived in Connecticut. We've lived in upper state New York. We traveled. Gerald, when we first got married, worked for the Canadian, cutting the border.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, worked for the government. And we worked in upper state New York. We traveled. And that was very interesting. Went to Connecticut. Lived for a while. Yeah, and that was very unusual back in them times. Usually you didn't get out of town.
Yeah.
You stayed right in town and got married and lived and died right in the same spot. But I got around. But it was on account of my husband's work. He was a good worker.
Did you ever have any jobs?
Yes, I worked in the Snowflake vegetable canning peas and French fries down in Corinna.
Really?
Yeah, and way back when I was a young girl, 16, I worked with my sister at the pea factory in Houlton.
What'd you do there?
Made boxes on a machine. Yeah, at 16 years old. Yeah, and
How much did you get paid?
I it wasn't very much. Uh, it would be the minimum wage, whatever that was, dollar something.
Dollar something an hour?
Yeah, it wasn't very much. No, in fact, that didn't change for quite a few years. And probably it wasn't $1 an hour. I don't really remember what my paycheck was.
What did your dad do for a living?
Oh, my dad worked for the railroad. He had a crew and his own box car, or car that the men would come in and eat. He did the cooking for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was a good cook. In fact, he was kind of famous for it, Blake Saunders. He was from Nova Scotia. And let's see, where else did he? Oh, he worked at what they called the PW camps, the prisoner of war camps.
Really?
Yeah, out in back of Bridgewater at the mountain out there. And he cooked out there for the prisoners of war.
Did he ever talk about that?
Oh yeah, we used to go out there. We could see the prisoners.
Was he gone a lot with that job?
Yeah. Yeah, and he was gone a lot on the railroad too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to go visit him in Masardis, and wherever he would be at a certain time, we would go by train. Mama had a free pass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he let you go up and see the prisoners?
Yeah, well, they would be coming into camp to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And never had no problems, like you could go anywhere back then and not worry about, your children.
Yeah.
No, Mama let me go in the woods and everywhere. Yeah, I could travel 2 or 3 miles from the house all by myself, and when we moved to Bridgewater, and there would be other children on the road, and we would go up in the woods, and you didn't have to worry about being molested or any of those things back then. Today you can't let your child go out in its own dooryard and play. You have to be very watchful. I don't know how come that is. You very seldom heard of anybody ever, anything happening to them bad.
Did your mother like your dad's job?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but she oftentimes said when I was growing up, wherever your husband is, you should be there with him, working, with him.
Yeah.
Dad was away from home a lot, and Mama said she really wasn't married, and she wasn't single either. She didn't have a single woman's life, but she was married.
Yeah.
But she said it didn't seem like she was married because her husband wasn't home when other husbands were home with their wives and children. Hers was away working. He always claimed there was more money, for him to be away from home.
Yeah.
And working. Yeah.
How did you meet your husband?
Oh, I met him, my goodness, he was supposed to have been a double date, a blind date. But I told my girlfriend, I said, well, I'm not going out with somebody before I see them. So yeah, I was working at the time into the Woolworths in Houlton. And they had small chain stores back then. And I worked at the food counter.
Yeah.
And I said, you have him come in and sit in my area, and I'll get a glimpse of him before I'm going to go out with him. Because I wasn't going to go out with some cross-eyed whatever. So, yeah, he came in, he sat in my area, and I don't know what he ordered, but anyway, I waited on him, and that's how I met my husband. He was supposed to be a blind date. And we went out to Nickerson Lake, and that was where they had a pavilion over the water, and the music would be playing.
Yeah.
It was a dance place, kind of like, and very sedate back then.
How old were you when you met him?
17. It was the year I was 17.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're eligible. Anyway, but that's awful young, Sarah. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I did want children, and them were the happiest years of my life when I was having my children. And I had 6 by the time I was 25.
Gee
So
whiz.
I was a busy girl. I was what you called barefoot and pregnant for first few years of my life. But I went everywhere and did everything. Like I said, we traveled upper state New York, and yeah, well, I had and lived up in Coburn Gore. That was way up in the Willywags, the woods on the Canadian border. Um, Houlton Gore was the name of it. And my husband did woods work there. Worked in the woods. We had pets. We had a cat named Snowshoes. I loved my cats. Always had a cat.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.